Hi, and welcome to another episode of the Marion County Children's Services Agency podcast. My name is Elizabeth Moore. I'm the Foster Care and Community Engagement Coordinator. And here with me today, I have Josh. Josh, do you want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
Sure, yeah. My name is Josh Kramp. I'm from Marion here. We live here in Marion. I grew up in Marion, so yeah.
Welcome. Well, Josh is actually one of our foster parents. One of our newer foster parents. And May is National Foster Care Month, so we are going to be highlighting a few of our foster families, starting with friends of mine. Really, What's so funny is a couple of the families that we're gonna talk to are people that I knew before.
Nice.
So,
awesome.
So we're gonna just go ahead and jump right in. So, what would you say is your family type?
Oh, family type, right. So I'm married. To my wife, Amy. We started dating in high school, as you're aware. So we got married in 2005, so we've been married, what's the math, 15, 16 years. So we have two kids. Josiah is 11 and Elise is 10, and they go to Pleasant. So yeah, I mean, as far as our type, I mean, that's our makeup. I don't know our type. We're kind of a laid back, just easy come, easy go,
Yeah, so
family.
I'm looking at this and I'm like, what did I mean by that when I asked you that question?
Sure. Well, I didn't ask you to clarify
and
that.
That's so fine. So every family obviously is totally different at Marion County Children's Services. There's no requirement that you are married. There's no requirement that you have a partner or anything like that. We have single parents. And so I'm not sure if that's where I was heading with that, but all right. Yeah. So why did you guys choose to be a foster family?
Yeah. So I know this question is geared towards foster care, and I appreciate that. But even, as far back as I can remember, whenever I started thinking about a family, I don't know when that was. I don't know if it was the end of high school or right at marriage. I don't know when that was. I've always loved adoption, right? So this idea of, and we're a Christian family, so that falls into the type thing, right? So we're a Christian family. We believe that through Christ's life and death that we've been adopted into God's family. So this whole idea of adoption parallels the gospel really well, I think. And it's just a really cool thing. These kids who no longer have a family for whatever reason, and for however length of time, whether it's a short amount of time or a long amount of time, grafting them in to another family is just this really awesome thought to me. So, I mean, as far as when Amy and I started talking about it, probably not long before we got, we took the training and that kind of thing. So probably 2 or 3 years ago, we started talking about, we've always had a heart for adoption. So I don't mean to steal your thunder if you're getting to this, but we got into foster care primarily for foster to adopt. So our goal ultimately is to adopt out of this. But so far we've been certified, I think, since October-ish. So 6-7 months, right around there. We've had one placement who was a newborn, and we have a current placement now, and we've done respite for a couple. So what was your question again? I'm sorry. Oh, why did we go to foster? It's a reflection of God's love for us to these kids. And it's just a way for us to provide a safe, hopefully loving environment for these kids who may not have had it before, or if they don't know what safe means or necessarily what love means really well. So we're hoping to provide that to these kids.
So I have a philosophy, and that's that all parents love their children.
Sure.
They just need help or support in showing that. And so, and that's what we do hope our foster families can help, show kids love, and then also help the parents, because we all receive love differently too.
Right.
The one other thing I wanted to talk about that you had just mentioned was respite.
Yeah.
So some people don't know what respite means, and respite is huge. That's a huge need actually in Marion. Respite is where you can provide a temporary break to some of our foster parents with foster placements, but also we have a need for respite homes in Marion for other families, for families whose kids aren't involved in the foster care system. So we actually have to fully license these respite homes now. But what's really cool is that it does give you the opportunity. I know you guys had kind of jumped in and helped some of those families. Because, I mean, parents usually like to have some time away,
right?
And so they're, you know, that's great that we can use those licensed homes to provide that respite. So, what has helped you be a successful foster parent?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think first and foremost, our church. You know, we don't feel like we're alone in this. And of course, I mean, immediate family is helpful. But I feel the most support, I guess, through our local church. So, you know, they've kind of rallied. I think it was close to the first Sunday after we got licensed, they gave us a goodie basket with all sorts of things that the kids might need, you know, that kind of thing. So, I think just knowing that we have a support system behind us has been really helpful. And being flexible. Like, it's funny, like, COVID kind of sucks.
Right?
So, but at the same time, it has opened up some opportunities, especially for Amy and myself, to work from home.
Okay.
So we've been able to work from home since March of last year. And I think since then we've become certified and had some kids, and we've been able to take them to appointments. We had one of our placements had to spend some time with children's. So we were able to spend a couple nights there and be with him, where I think our workplaces would have let us do that, but I was able to work from the hospital room.
Yeah.
You know? I had a new job actually at the time, so it was kind of like, oh my gosh. But being flexible has been really helpful.
Probably even more so as a foster parent than you had to as a parent, too.
Yeah, absolutely. Right. I mean,
which already required flexibility.
Yeah, right. But I mean, just, flexibility. I mean, with your own kids, I think you know some of the things that are coming, right? Like you're planning for these events. Whereas if you have a placement, you're like, oh, okay, now we have this on this night, this on this night. So just the ability to be flexible, I think, is important.
Yeah. So I do think that question was actually specifically because of you talked about your church.
Yeah.
So your church had actually reached out to me prior to your license being completed and asked, how can we better support the foster families?
Yes,
and so let that be a little plug for some of those churches. Right. Be the Village. I think I got Rachel connected with Be the Village, and they kind of jumped right in, and everyone was, it's really cool to see that. Yeah. But that's your community. Yeah. You need that community support, which I think, and this is something I've talked about with other people I've had on the podcast. Like Jackie and I just had this conversation on my last podcast about, you know, I as a parent have always needed community.
Oh, sure.
And then you add the additional layer of additional appointments and visitation and all of those things. And you need that support.
Yeah.
So
absolutely.
What is some advice that you would give to someone who is considering becoming a foster parent?
So I think I have to fall back on kind of what's made us successful, quote unquote, right? Like making sure you have that community. We should have done a better job of this, but the class, the group of folks that was in our certification class, there was one couple about our age, I'm guessing, who we kind of talked to more than the other couples, and we told ourselves we were going to keep in touch with them, and we really didn't. But that's a really good opportunity, a good place for you to start forming those relationships and getting to know people and hanging out with those groups. And Children's Services has a private Facebook group, and actually that's how we came into contact with one of the kids that we provided respite for. Was someone just put on there, hey, we need someone for the weekend. And we were able to message them and say, hey, we're happy to take them. So taking advantage of the support, getting that support, taking advantage of it, working with your caseworkers, right? So I feel, I'm the kind of person that feels bad about like hounding people like with questions all the time. But the caseworkers here, the 2 or 3 that we've had experiences with, have been very open and very encouraging and just reinforcing that's the reason we're here. That's the reason we're here. And it's true.
They're also busy.
They're
but
also busy, yes.
No, that's
yes.
exactly what
Right.
we're here for.
Yeah, exactly. So I think resources, communicating with your caseworker is obviously a big deal. What was the question again? I'm sorry.
Advice you would give to someone who's considering
considering it, right. So I guess some of those are for people who've maybe just started or whatever, but I think if you're considering it, just, I guess, ask yourself why you're doing it. Maybe that's too basic. I don't know. You know what I mean? Making sure that your
heart is in the right place.
I guess, something like that. I mean, I don't know. It's making sure you have a schedule that is flexible enough for those kind of things, and being willing, I guess, maybe to sacrifice some things that you need to take off the table if you really want to do that. So, I seek counsel from those who are wiser than you, and just see if it feels like the right fit, I guess.
Would you say that it's fair to say that there is a difference between, because you guys were experienced parents.
Yeah, right, yeah.
But now you're saying seek counsel from people who, are experienced. So there's a difference, right, between foster parenting and traditional parenting.
Right. So that's a good point. I'm glad you said that. Like bringing in our kids, right?
Oh,
so
yeah.
That's a different dynamic. I think that's an experience that we were aware of. So when we go through the certification here, they referenced a training book or material for the kids. And we went through that as we were getting licensed. We were going through that with the kids, and it was certainly helpful. We were able to answer some questions that probably wouldn't have come up in other circumstances.
Yeah.
But if you have kids, understanding the dynamic of your kids, because we've had one placement that I was a little surprised that our kids maybe didn't gel as well, for lack of a better term. They get along fine. That's not an issue, but I think they're seeing some differences maybe in how we parent our kids and how we're guiding the foster kids. So we had to work through that situation a couple times with our kids. So making sure you understand your family dynamic and what will fit well with your family and what won't.
So I have a tradition where I ask an unscripted question, and this isn't normally where it is, but I feel like this kind of fits to what you're saying. So that is probably a big fear I hear out there for families that have children that are considering fostering. A lot of them will say, well, I'm going to wait until the kids are older. I'm going to wait until they're out of the house. Or I'm going to wait until basically my kids aren't going to be affected by this. Right. So what would you say to families in that situation?
Talk to your kids. I mean, it depends, of course, on level of maturity and that kind of thing. But our kids...
Well, your kids are 10 and 11.
That's right.
You
said?
I
was going to say, So our kids at the time would have been 9 or 10.
Yeah.
So we were able to have conversations with them and say, this is what we're planning on doing. This is going to be the experience, that kind of thing. So I think when we were first licensed, you have the opportunity to kind of talk with your caseworker about the type of placement that would fit best in your home. So being honest with your caseworker about that, I think, is really important. And also, you guys have said the need is there. Obviously, the need is there. But you guys have been very open in saying, if you don't feel like it's a good fit for your home, then we can say no. And I'm a yes person. It's hard for me to do that. But
that's good to know.
Yeah, I know, right? Jot that down.
Exactly.
So being able to, again, get an understanding of your family dynamic and acting accordingly, I think is important. I hope I answered your question there.
I think so. And then if you want to just touch real quick about licensing, because you did just go through that process.
Yes.
What did that look like?
Right. So you might have to help me on this a little bit.
Sure.
Obviously, we went through the training class.
36 hours.
Thank you. Yes, 36 hours. I think we did once a week or 2 days a week for 4 or 5 weeks straight.
Yeah, so that's different now.
Okay, so that's changed. Okay.
So you don't have to focus so much on that specifically.
Okay, all right. So we
36 hours.
Okay, so 36 hours of training. And then, we went through the licensing process, which was home visits right? So the first visit, if I remember correctly, was a lot of discussion, not so much walking around the home and checking for safety, that kind of thing. So getting to know your caseworker, asking, fairly difficult questions. I understand, your job, of course, is to make sure it's a safe place to be. So those questions have to be there.
Yeah, one comment I get even on the application is, that's a very extensive application. And I'm like, we're putting other people's kids in your home.
That's
so,
right. Yes. Yeah, absolutely.
Sure.
So, so we got to know our caseworker really well. And then after that, of course, left us a stack of paperwork. So we filled out the paperwork and we had our home visits to look around the house, make sure we're meeting all the safety requirements, those kind of things. And then, getting the vaccinations if needed, getting the fire chief, the fire inspector to come in and make sure everything's kosher there. So, looking back on it, it wasn't that difficult at all. It's just kind of planning things out well, making sure you fill out the paperwork and those kind of things. But relatively, seamless, easy process.
So I feel like the unofficial part of the home study is like, if you can make it through all of that and get licensed, like, you've got some patience.
Yeah, and that's right. Good point. Yes.
That's, which is needed, right? When you're
yeah.
parenting any children.
Yeah, that's a good point.
So
that's a good point.
Yeah. Well, is there anything else that you want to add or talk about when it comes to being a foster parent?
Oh gosh. I guess I would just say, any expectations that you have walking into it, probably not going to be there.
Just leave them at the door.
Actually do get in there, right? Yeah.
Sure.
So either you have rose-colored glasses and you think you're going to get this placement that is just going to,
it's going to be
whatever
perfect.
that looks like. Yeah, I don't know if falls in love with you right away or just is perfectly obedient, whatever that is. I don't know what that looks like to whoever's listening or watching, but that's probably not going to happen. And you're probably not going to have the other edge case of just, this stereotypical maybe, just an
like the worst case scenario.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. Trashing things or whatever that looks like. But I mean, just keep in mind, again, we're doing it for, because of our faith, right? So we're doing it out of God's love for us. So just keep that in the back of your mind, I guess, for whatever reason you're doing it, whatever reason you got into it. Yeah. That's right. Yeah. Just keep thinking about that as you're going through the process. So we've been really fortunate. We had a newborn for 5 weeks. So, that was different.
Since you hadn't had that in 9 years at the time. Right.
But that, it was a good time. And then we have a 9-year-old now. So, we have a pretty wide range. So, I don't know, just whatever expectations you have, leave them at the door, I guess.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is probably great advice when you're working with people in general.
Sure. Yeah, that's a good point. Right. Well, it's interesting because, you have the caseworker, of course, will tell you everything they can about your placement before they're placed. But other than that, you don't have any history with parents or the placement, him or herself. So anything, what their school is like, how they're doing socially, all this other stuff. So you just kind of have to be flexible and be willing to love the kids how they need to be loved, right? I think one of the things with our kids, they notice, I think a little bit of our parenting style has changed for these kids as opposed to when we were, raising our kids. And I think for me personally, some of that is, I recognize areas when I was raising my kids where I could have been a little more laxed about, right? And maybe not as strict about. So I can exercise that now with these kids, whereas I can exercise it with my kids. It's just they're in a different time of life right now. So,
that's great.
I hope that answers your question.
Probably.
Cool.
I think it was, do you have anything else you want to add? So
I did.
Anything you were going to say was going to be right. So, all right. Well, Josh, thank you so much for being on. And as always, if you have any ideas for future episodes of the podcast, I'll leave my contact information down below. And as always, have a great week. Thanks.